Hi, and welcome to Into the Deep End, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the minds of swim coaches to uncover what leadership really looks like, both on the deck and beyond the lane lines. I'm your host, Coach Kelly, and in each episode, I sit down with coaches who are making waves in the sport to explore how and why behind their approaches to leadership. So just to backstroke a little bit, we're working with Chada Durai's multidimensional model of leadership, plus that extra layer of transformative leadership. Let's remember our four currents: required behavior, what the role demands; preferred behavior, what athletes want; actual behavior, what the coach actually does; and transformative leadership, the deeper impact. But here's the twist. At the college level, all of this gets more complicated. Required behavior? Well, now you have NCAA rules, scholarship pressures, recruiting timelines, academic standards, not to mention you're managing a bigger staff and a larger team with larger dynamics. Preferred behavior. Your athletes are a little older. They're more independent. They're more vocal. They've had different coaching styles their whole lives and come to you with their own expectations at this time. Some want mentorship while others want space. Some want to be pushed hard and others need more balance. The coach has to tune in and often adjust. Actual behavior. This is where experience, bandwidth, and personality show up. College coaches juggle everything from early morning lifts to late night team meetings, admin tasks to alumni engagement. What they intend to do and what actually happens. That gap can be real. Transformative leadership, this may be the most important layer in college swimming. Athletes are in a key life transitional period, away from home, balancing identity, stress, possibly starting a new career as well as school and sport. The coaches who lead with purpose and presence are the ones who leave a lasting impact beyond the pool. So whether you're here to learn, reflect, or just nerd out about coaching, you're in the right lane. Let's take it into the deep end with today's guest, Coach Eileen Bringham. Coach Eileen Bringham's journey started in the water, not just on deck. As a student athlete at Pacific University, she broke 6 program records, 2 of which in her signature events, the 100-yard and the 200-yard backstroke. She was team captain, president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and graduated in 2010 with a degree in exercise science. Right out of the pool, Eileen dove headfirst into coaching. She spent nearly a decade growing and leading my club team, Lakeshore Swim Club in Cleveland, from 2012 to 2021, expanding the program from about 80 swimmers to around 200 as she produced its first ever Olympic trials and junior national qualifiers. In 2020, she was named Lake Erie Swimming's Senior Head Coach of the Year. And at that same time, she was building Fairview Public High School's program from the ground up as one of its own proud alumni. She took the program from 11 to 40 athletes and transformed a last place finish into a top 10 regional contender. Several swimmers broke team records and qualified for the state championships during her 6-year career there. In 2021, Eileen moved to Texas as she joined Lakeside Aquatic Club as their senior assistant coach, working with the club's top athletes ages 11 to 18. That same year, she stepped onto the collegiate stage, joining Cornell University's coaching staff. Over 3 seasons, she helped the Big Red achieve 20 school records and 95 program top 10 performances. Following the 2023-2024 season, she was promoted to assistant head coach. Now, Eileen's impact extends beyond the United States, as in 2023 she was selected to the U.S. coaching staff for the World University Games in Chengdu, China. She also coached at elite camps with the U.S. Naval Academy as well as Northwestern University, and represented Ohio on the Mid-State All-Star coaching staff 3 times, plus as a Lake Erie zone coach in 2012, 2018, and 2021. Most recently, in July of 2025, Duke University was lucky enough to bring on Coach Eileen as their newest member to their swimming and diving coaching staff. She joins the Blue Devils as an assistant coach, and I can't wait to see what she does next. Let's dive into the conversation with Coach Eileen right here on Into the Deep End. All right, so today's conversation, I have the beautiful, the multi-talented, so excited to have Coach Eileen Bringham here with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited for this too.
So my first question, this has to do with the required leadership, so a required action in your leadership role of college athletics. So how does the NCAA governing body, the rules, your athletic department, and performance expectations shape your direct leadership approach?
Probably a lot more than they should sometimes. I think right now it's worth maybe kind of noting like what's going on in Division I athletics is it's sort of the wild, wild west and is changing almost every day. So, but the biggest thing being the House settlement that just went through, which if you're familiar with or unfamiliar with, basically two-sided. Athletes were suing for back pay. Athletes who didn't have access to NIL deals were suing for back pay. So if that would have gone to trial, it would have bankrupted the NCAA and most its member athletic institutions. So they settled. So one piece of that is that settlement is that all Division I colleges are sharing the cost of that. So I know my previous institution, that was $4 million over 10 years being paid out to former athletes, which at that institution, that's like a good chunk of change and a big part of their budget. So schools are dealing with that side of the budget. The other side of this settlement created revenue sharing for athletes directly from the athletic department, meaning that up to $22 million from the athletic department itself can and will go directly to athletes. So that's why you're hearing about now, like, quarterback making $8 million or whatever. I think is what the Duke quarterback is making. Wow. Things like that. And that's coming right out of the athletic department budget. So some places that have a $300 million budget, that's not a huge dent, but that's Texas and Ohio State. That's a select few schools that are dealing with that or have the ability to not worry about it too much. That also brought over, instead of scholarship limits, it's unlimited scholarships, but there are roster limits. So if a conference and a school opts into these things, so the Ivy League, for example, is not opting in because they don't really deal with money. So they don't have roster limits because they already weren't doing scholarships. They're not going to do payments. But in SEC school, for example, went from having a roster on a men's swim team of 40 to 22. And most other conferences are about 30. So we're cutting huge pieces of our teams and just trying to make sure that we're staying relevant and figuring that out and navigating that side. So that's been a huge piece of what's been going on in the last 6 months, and that's all brand new. On top of that, like more and more is rolling out alongside that. So all of that being said comes with a lot of budget cuts, a lot of budget constraints, and a lot of fear surrounding like sports like swimming that are non-revenue based sports. So that pressure to create value on your campus, that pressure to create value in performance, in Director's Cup points, is huge and a really big part of it. And then those pressures of making those roster cuts, of kind of proving the worth of each athlete on paper, has been a really interesting perspective. But I think that the budget is the biggest constraint right now, and just making sure that swimming is showing its value has a lot of pressure on all of my colleagues.
So with these external pressures or challenges, does anything within this realm kind of reinforce like a natural leadership tendency that you have that you feel is like a non-negotiable to keep, even though you have these governing bodies kind of over your head with things that they want or need?
Yeah. So non-negotiables for me is just like to make every athlete know their place on the team. I think like I've had plenty of athletes who are not going to score a point at conference, but are the reason that like our top level recruits come to a place because they're like the best ambassadors for the team, or people who I can think of, like one person in particular who I got to work with for several years, who she's never going to make our conference team, but the reason some of our athletes reached A finals or got their NCAA cuts were because they trained with her every day, and she not only worked so hard, she brought them up, she brought a good attitude, she uh, made everything better. So I like being as invested in her goals, and making sure that she feels seen and valued is a non-negotiable for me, and like battling to keep those types of athletes and making sure that we still have room for growth, not just like always expecting to squeeze everything out of them right away, but like investing in their futures and investing in them as people. I try to really manage.
And with your team, can you kind of define like the different leadership roles? Like I know that you have like elected captains, and kind of what you're talking about reminds me of what I would put as like a social or like a peer leader that on the team doesn't really have much say, but the social persuasion of the entire like team what's it called? Cohesion kind of relies on them, even if it's not an official role.
Yeah. I so well, I'll tell you. So this is my first year at Duke, so I've only been here a couple months. So a lot of my questions will reference my previous institution, which is Cornell, just because I had a lot more time and experience there. So at Cornell, we did vote on captains, so it was team driven. At Duke, they did it differently. So they emailed in over the summer like a letter of interest and basically like an application, and then the coaches chose from there. And their teammates could also email in and like talk on somebody's behalf of like why they thought somebody would be good. So it's interesting. I think every team does a little bit different, but so we elected captains. We do have like social kind of chairs. At Cornell, that was a little more informal. At Duke, that's more formal, where like they're in charge of planning some social events during recruiting visits and things like that, or like parent dinners when they're in town. So we do have those things, and then on a larger scale, like within the athletic department, there's always SAC representatives, and they represent the team on a on a scale within the department. So in addition to those things, though, I do think, and I don't know if this gets to the root of what you're saying, but I do always at Cornell, I always had this conversation with people who were like, if we voted for 3 captains and they were in 4th place, like that's a person who the team really values and looks at as a leader, and that it usually hits them pretty hard when they don't get that title, because it's not that they don't deserve it. It's just, these other people got more votes or whatever it might be and make more sense for the role in that moment. But I always talk to them like it's always a moment of like, they feel like a loss, but then kind of always talk to them about that you're actually going to have a pretty important role here. Like you're going to be a person that people can go to without overthinking like, oh, the captains are going to go right to the coaches, or the captains are going to, whatever. Without that title, they actually are sometimes more approachable and become like a much more important role player. And when they lean into that, like it explodes, like it becomes even bigger because it's so apparent. I can think of one athlete who did it so well. So I think that those things go a really long way.
So now this is kind of jumping into the actual leadership style. So this has nothing to do with the required. This is more so your individual coaching style. So what would you say your go-to coaching style is, if you could describe?
I think that I am very athlete centered. Um, for me, like everything starts with the relationships and building trust with my athletes. I think I've seen a lot of people, or have known a lot of people who have experienced, you know, kind of ego-driven coaches who, I'm sure, I like to believe, at least inadvertently, are borderline or actually emotional abusive. And that like has hit me hard throughout the years of just like making sure that I am never that I always want to be a source of positivity. Um, and that at the end of the day, like this is something we do and not who we are. And so I always try to reinforce that and make sure that we create a bigger picture. But I have a open door policy. Still like connecting with the athletes I'm working with at Duke, but I at Cornell basically put a couch in a closet and called it the lounge, and that way, it was just like this safe space to come in and meet and talk about, and I think most of the time talk about whatever they needed to talk about. So whether that's just like connecting and talking about goals, watching some videos, whatever it might be related to swimming, or just like, those in those moments where you're like, I have 100 things to do, but then when you actually like say it out loud to somebody and process it, you're like, I only have 2 things to do, but they're like important and I'm stressed about it. And then, you can kind of get on with your day. And I feel like most of the time, if you could say it out loud, it loses its power. And then if it's something more serious, then I can be a go-between and connect, if somebody's facing a mental health issue or whatever it might be, we can connect to like more professional resources. But that was huge for me to just be available and show up for my athletes. And I think once you develop those relationships and they know that first and foremost, I care about them as people, then I can push them pretty hard, and they know it's coming from a place of love and of support of their own goals. And so then when I'm not letting them breathe and doing all kinds of crazy things, we can laugh about it, but they can trust that it's the best interest at heart.
I can personally attest to that statement there. So would you say that your leadership style during high pressure situations, so say this is coming up to a championship season or maybe a mid-season meet where a lot of people, you want some time drops, you want people to see the progress that they've made, would you say that your leadership style shifts within those situations, or would you say that it's more important to stay grounded and true to your theory?
Well, I can tell you that it is more important to stay grounded and true to my theory. I can tell you that I am imperfect, and I don't think that always happens, but I definitely, I mean, I still have that same mentality, and I think that time of year leading into like a conference championship or whatever it might be is definitely, for me, important to just like build confidence as much as possible, and find opportunities to be a little goofy and get them out of their heads. If that's some visualization to Phil Collins, or different ways of relaxing, and just do some of the serious things but also have fun with it, is really big. I can tell you, like, last year was a tough year for me and for our team at different points, and there were some big disappointments at our conference meet, and I feel like I'm really usually pretty good at spinning it like, oh, this is, part of it. We're just going to get through this. And it's not that I didn't do that, but I could really feel like my emotions were harder to keep in check. So certainly imperfect at it, but I do try to keep a big picture in mind. It's just when I start internalizing it, then I don't take my own advice and lose sight of it. But for them, I think I do a pretty good job of staying calm, and I can put the spin on anything. Like if our first race is bad, oh, we just got to get a race out of the way, and then move forward. Whatever the narrative they need in that moment, I try to fulfill.
Mm-hmm. So, can you share an example where your leadership style would have to evolve based on a mid-season or like a change in team dynamic or a challenge you faced during the season?
Yeah, so I have a couple ideas in mind for this, but college is really interesting because every year it's wildly different, and usually that starts in the spring. We come back, and the seniors are gone, so you're like leaders, and a lot of times the big personalities are gone, and you have to reinvent the team, and then a whole new set of freshmen arrives. So it's kind of an ever evolving, changing dynamic. I know I referenced this already last season that we struggled a little bit. We did graduate a really talented team or group of kids, and or they're not kids, uh, and they were big personalities, and so it left a big mark, and it was a little bit of a rebuild year, which we knew was going to come. So the fall, I think, in a lot of ways, where we should have done more, I don't think we did, and I could feel it, but I just was like in this position of being frozen. And so like I know halfway through I just like kind of sat myself down and was like, okay, what where are our holes? How can I show up with better energy? What can I do? And second semester definitely, like as soon as I got to training trip, was a lot better. Uh, uh, my best example of that is before college coaching. I went from being a assistant coach and head age group coach to head coach to a club team. I think you're familiar with, uh, but basically in a day. Like this transition happened mid-season. It was about probably 6 weeks out from your state championship,
Hmm.
uh, and also about like 2 months before COVID hit. Uh, so you know these athletes that I had worked with since they were little and who always, I mean, not that there was like a lack of respect or anything. I'd been with them for a really long time, but I was in an assistant coach role. I was in charge of a lot, but um, a head coach is a different role than an assistant coach. And so to transition there, both like to maintain like a level of discipline and respect, but also to make sure that you guys as athletes like never felt that your season was interrupted, that your training was ever interrupted or lacking, and that like whatever you needed to be successful that season was not going to be missed, and that was going to keep smooth. And so that was a crazy time. And then the hits kept coming when COVID hit, and we had to reassess and do everything different. So I think coaching keeps you on your toes, and especially those situations are really good learning experiences.
So, with coaching in this collegiate space, we're talking about balance here. How are you able to balance being a coach, kind of stepping out of that, and just like you said, it's your job, it's not who you are, and also being a mentor to these kids at this college level?
Um, well, if I was gonna give somebody advice, I would say probably like setting boundaries is important, and I definitely tell them that. I don't always do that, but I enjoy, like I really enjoy those relationships. I find it to a place of privilege if I'm a person that they're comfortable with going to for whatever they might need to talk about, uh, or whatever support they might need. So if somebody invites me to a presentation they're giving for their honors project, like I'm going to show up, and things like that. I just think go a long way to invest in them as people, um, and then uh, and then being able to, when they see that, I think there's an appreciation there. I think they then know that I'm invested in not just the points they score or the time on the scoreboard, but what they can become, and how being a part of our team hopefully can only add to that. Uh, but it's definitely it's not always easy. I think there are days where I can have somebody that I know is going through something, and can sit in my office teary eyed, and then we get on deck, and I still have to push them. Like, and that's tough. Like that's tough, like emotionally on me to be like, I know you're going through it, but I also know that you have goals, and like you'll regret if you let this, this thing win over whatever's going on. So like make sure when we step on deck, how can we compartmentalize and keep going? Now that's not something serious. Like if, they've got a mental health issue or like a physical issue, we're going to address it in a different way. But if their boyfriend broke up with them and they're brokenhearted, like that's awful. And that's a really bad day, but we're not going to let him ruin our season, like, and how to like balance those types of things. And make sure that I don't just want to be like, let's just go get ice cream, because that's what I'm going to want to do. But I know like, no, we're going to do this hard set and then we could go get ice cream like all together or whatever.
So this one is leading off into the preferred leadership section. So back to this balance. How do you as the coach balance the individuality of your athletes versus what the team may need?
Yeah, this is another really challenging one, and both the college programs that I am with, we're both pretty constrained on space, and so that on top of like this puzzle between individual and team makes it a little bit tougher. Like Cornell with 6 lanes, with 30 women. Duke, we have 55 men and women and 8 lanes. So we're breaking up into groups a lot, but it still means like, I have to plan with our top athletes in mind first and kind of piece together the rest. And so I think I touched on this a little bit, but that might mean like somebody, I can't change send-offs for somebody who's, maybe going to be training with someone who's an NCAA qualifier and who's like maybe a freshman or a walk-on or just not quite at that level. But so I can't adjust the whole practice or adjust the set, maybe how I would have in a club setting. But I do try to make sure they know I'm invested in their goals and their potential, and making sure that I'm coaching every athlete every day or connecting with every athlete in some capacity every day, and working that. But ultimately, like the goal of the team is going to be to win and to be successful and to compete at the highest level. And so I think it's okay to have like I've been able to have those conversations with some athletes sometimes, and that's a tough pill to swallow. But at the same time, being able to be like, but that doesn't mean that we can't do X, Y, and Z. And like, if you're not going to make this send off, we can still focus here and here, and then jump back in and make sure that it's going to work for them in some kind of way. But it's like a daily balance and challenge to make sure everyone feels seen, feels valued, but also making sure that we're looking to, a college Division I team is not a club. So like we are here to perform at a high level and to win. And that's going to come first a lot of the times.
So I guess with the college kids, my first reaction to this is, how would they typically express to you their preferences? If you have a team-centric view and someone's not making the send-offs, how do they voice their either approval or disapproval in your current leadership style or coaching? And how do you combat that without sacrificing, without compromising a victory, we'll say?
Yeah, I do think for the most part, I want them to advocate for themselves, and I think that that's also just good experience. So when sometimes I have to tease that out. Like if I can see somebody's really frustrated, like I'll pull them aside and say what's up and like see if they'll get it out. But a lot of times, like I'll have this conversation that like I do think when they're at this level, there should be some level of partnership, because they're at this level for a reason, and they know themselves. They know. So like if somebody is gonna say like if they come to me and are able to be like, I'm going to adjust this because that'll help me, then I listen. And if it's like a reasonable thing, I almost always am going to say yes, because I appreciate the effort. If it's something that's, doesn't make sense, like I'm going to do breaststroke when you're a backstroker, something like that, we're going to talk it through a little bit. But I do think at this level, they're pretty good at advocating for themselves. And I do encourage them to ask tough questions and ask for a why, and ask, for if they need more feedback, be specific. And then also just creating time after practice or before practice if they want to like video something, if they want a couple minutes on starts, if they want a couple minutes on a skill they're working on, then like making sure that I can be available for that, like kind of extra time when I can give some one-on-one.
Nice. So have you ever had to shift your approach because of what the team has responded to better, rather than coming into an environment and just using your own personal preference coaching style?
Yeah, I think, I'm an assistant coach, so I think almost like half the time I have to just respond to the head coach's coaching style and balance that. In a way that both like amplifies their vision and, so at Cornell it was just me and the head coach. And so I was like that was a big role. So I could balance off of him, and we had a great relationship. So I really knew, and we were really close. So I really knew like where he was gonna maybe not fall short, but where he wasn't gonna like put his energy in that I could, and pick up there and adjust. And it's funny, some of that I didn't even quite realize I was doing until I got here, and I have to shift. And now I'm a part of a staff with 5 other coaches, a head coach and 3 other assistants. And I have to balance off of all of them, and depending on like who I'm working with that day. And then I realized like, oh, I'm like responding to the atmosphere and what's needed. And like, it's not that like my coaching style doesn't come out, but I definitely like, if somebody it's not so simple, but like if somebody's coming on hard, then I'm going to try and be a little light and be like, you got this, and positive, or whatever it might be. But yeah, I feel like every day it's a little bit of reading the room and figuring out my best place.
All right. So then we're moving on to our final questions in our wrap-up segment here. So just a few, I guess, unrelated questions to kind of bring this together. What are some of the biggest differences you've noticed between learning to lead the freshmen and being able to lead your seniors?
This is so interesting, and everyone's an individual, but freshmen are coming in and their whole life is changing. They're in the middle of this really big transition where they're living with a stranger. Their whole lives they've been told they're good at time management, but all of a sudden now they actually have to manage their time and figure out how to fuel properly and get used to a new training style and probably a much more intense schedule, and not nap through class and do their homework, and just, figuring every little piece of their life out, doing laundry. At Cornell, it was being cold for the first time when they were coming from California. Just things like that. It's so much all at once. So with freshmen, I just like really try to be there. Almost at Cornell, I met with every freshman once a week. Here, I meet with a handful. We kind of split them up, but we take a lot of time to make sure we're staying connected with them and checking in with them, and just giving them basically a weekly excuse to ask for help, and just know that that's there. And I think that's one of the biggest skills we can teach them, is to ask for help when they need it. So I think that's where we go, and we'll err on the side of more rest with them if too many mornings are too much. Whereas seniors are the opposite. Like they have this huge life transition looming ahead of them. And so for them, like managing that anticipation, and there's so much of it, and could be, am I going to have a job lined up? Am I going to get into grad school? What am I doing? And I only have so much time left in my career. Am I going to have enough time to do what I want to do? Is it going to finish the way I want to finish? Do I just want it to be done? so navigating that and just trying to like keep them present and in the moment. And what are we doing today? And are like enjoy this and enjoy like I think it's really the best we haven't gone on a travel trip yet at Duke, but at Cornell, our first travel trip, we always paired freshmen and seniors together, uh, and it was the best. Like,
I was gonna say that sounds super fun.
it's so fun. And like the seniors feel young again, and they're like giggling, and they get like a little goofy that they forget they used to do with each other, and some of them like still talk about that experience. So I really love that side of it, and having them go through it together a little bit. So then those seniors also get to share their experience and but it also brings them back a little bit.
So, in a highly structured and time-bound sport such as swimming, I know we talked about your mini lounge that you created, but how do you create space for autonomy and decision-making or leadership opportunities within your team for your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough, right? Like we're all doing the same thing a lot of time, not like with whoever your training partners are. But I think, and definitely like my head coach at Duke is really good about this, of like talking to athletes and seeing, where they're at and how they're feeling throughout the week. And he'll bring it to them like, do you need to sleep in tomorrow? Do you think this is going to benefit you if you sleep in tomorrow? Like, are you show up in the afternoon and, uh, you know, be ready to go and like, let's do that. That's okay. Or like, oh, I've had too much backstroke this week. And so he'll adjust and, switch to freestyle. So like little things like that, I think just listening and adjusting their training schedule or listening to what they might feel is missing or what they'd like to add, I think goes with that autonomy a little bit. I do think there's probably opportunities to do that more or like embrace the idea of autonomy a little bit. Uh, but they also love structure a little bit, so not too much. But uh, and then the leadership stuff, I like really, I do try to empower everybody. Like, if somebody's, I'll challenge them to think about things differently, or if whatever body language looks a certain way, I try not to just like yell at somebody. I try to challenge them in a way that's like, how's that affecting your team? And haven't you talked to me about wanting to be captain one day? Like, what does that look like? And just taking ownership for things like that. And then also just like, I like want them to reach out to each other more than anything, or like them to take ownership of like, if somebody comes to me and is like, this person's doing this, I go, okay, well, what did they say when you talked to them about it? And like, oh no, I was talking to you about it. Like, okay, well, why don't you have a conversation with them? And like, I'm happy to be with you, but like, if this is bothering you, you need to be able to like communicate it, and trying to create opportunities, stuff like that. And once they learn how to have those conversations, like I think they do become really great leaders, and it's an important, it's a big value on a team. You spend a lot of time with each other, so like, there's bound to be conflict. If they can talk it out, they can get through most things.
All right, and this is the second to last question before our final thoughts. So when your required and actual as well as preferred leadership behaviors align, what impact does that have on your team's performance?
Well, that's the dream, I think. I think like then if, on the coaching side, if your preferred and actual behaviors align, that means like you're staying true to your values and you're able to not just say this is what you want to do, but actually put it into application. And then if you can get the administration behind you, that makes life just so much easier. And yeah, I think most administrations want to be supportive. There's just a lot of red tape a lot of the times.
And so, what does leadership at this collegiate level teach you about effective coaching?
Oh, uh, I mean, I think most of all, I think the things that I personally see from other coaches and from, I think the best coaches are really good at like keeping their egos in check, and really like trying to put the athletes first and seeing a bigger picture and knowing that like one thing doesn't define. But yeah, I think when you can keep your ego in check, then I think you can get to the root of a lot of different things and grow. I don't know if that's the best answer. uh, yeah, well, I do think I stand by that, I guess. Like I do think when your goal is like service towards these athletes and not to make yourself look good, then I think it's gonna work out, and be the right situation for everyone involved. So I think those are the coaches that I look up to, and I think I see a lot of, and that's across every sport.
All right, and my final question for you, final question after our final thoughts. Um, is there anything that you would want to shout out that you're doing currently, or something that you're working on that you're excited in the coaching world, or any big meets that you have coming up that you'd like to share with the podcast?
Well, so Duke and UNC are big rivals, and we swam UNC on Friday, and the women beat them for the first time in several years.
Wow.
And they just swam lights out. So that was really fun to be a part of, and I think this team has been fun to be a part of. I think definitely as the season progresses, we'll be climbing the rankings and surprising some people, which is cool. We'll have our midseason meet, and then NCAAs and ACCs, which will be fun. I'll come home at Christmas time and make a Lakeshore and a Fairview visit. I always really like to. I always run like a Fairview clinic, and for those high schoolers, and because you're coaching at Lakeshore, I'll stop by there too. But I do love doing those things. I think like it, those are where I learned how to do everything, and the only reason I have gotten to be at cool places doing what I do is because of the athletes I got to coach at those places. So I like to stay connected there, and those are the things that excite me.
Today made it clear that effective coaching goes beyond the stopwatch and the scoreboard. The best leaders inspire athletes to reach beyond performance, build trust, and model strong ethics. They enhance motivation, satisfaction, team cohesion, mental health, and provide individualized support that meets the athlete exactly where they are. At the same time, they balance required standards with athlete preferences, fostering ownership and a sense of responsibility. Great coaches adapt their leadership style to the dynamics of the team, the maturity of the athletes, and the challenges of the season. When required, actual, and preferred behaviors are aligned, performance, cohesion, and trust all rise. Ultimately, effective coaching integrates skill development with personal growth, embracing the dual role of coach and mentor to guide athletes both in and out of the pool.
All right. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you for my little podcast here, Into the Deep End with Coach Kelly. And it's been such an honor to be able to interview someone who I looked up to, coaching-wise and just personally growing up. So this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.